What's going up, YouTube? It's your man D.Royul, and welcome to another episode of Tips on the Beat, where I, D.Royul, will make a beat, and I'm going to give you 5 insights to how I made it to hopefully give you a different insight into how you create music in your own life. As you can see, I look a little different. Got my hair done, got a nice fresh shape up. The reason being, this week's beat takes us back a little bit. Today is my 2nd wedding anniversary with my beautiful wife, and I want to give you insight to a beat I made and performed on our wedding day. So today, it's more than just a beat, it's a song. I wrote and recorded this and performed this to her during our reception. As a matter of fact, I might even give you a little sneak peek on what that looked like or what that sounded like at the end of this video. But it's a different type of beat, and this one has more of a live instrument sound. Now, I didn't actually use any live instruments because I don't have access to that kind of recording during that time. It was time to get ready for the wedding, all that other stuff leading up to it, so I worked with my system that I have here. But I did a lot of things to make it still actually sound like it's a live instrumentation, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, if we're going to talk about live instrumentation, there's going to be ways that we look about this differently than the past beats. So this is going to be some new stuff, hopefully, that will give you some really cool things in how you're creating music. Now, let's start from the beginning and see how it came together. Alright guys, tip number 1. If you like a stock sound, okay, there's no reason that you can't use stock sounds. Some people will make you believe that because you use them, you're, I don't know, cheating or you're not working. But what I'm trying to create in this track, this crunchy muted delay guitar fits exactly where I want it to. I even messed around with the delay a bit, but I actually like it exactly where it is and where I'm trying to go. So it's okay that I leave it right where it is. Why? Because it fits my needs in my creation of the track. And actually, this is going to lead us into tip number 2. Craft your drum sounds as needed. Right now, I am trying to create a track that sounds like it's from the 70s or such. And those drums from the 70s weren't too pumping in your face, but they had a groove to them and they had a specific sound. So what I did is I created a drum kit off of 3 different sounds, 3 different drum kits. The snare, the hi-hat, and the bass are all from 3 separate kits, and I'm using them to try to make this one cohesive sound that I'm searching for. But now I'm going to go in and I'm going to EQ them a bit. So what I've got going on right here is the Motown revisited hi-hat. I put a compressor on it, where if I take off the compressor, it falls a little back. So I wanted it to sit in the front a little more. And I've got a 4 on the floor snare, which I took the compressor off of it. It came with one, which took away some of the punch and gave it a little bit of a smaller hit. So I wanted it to hit larger. And this Liverpool kick, I messed around with the there's 2 compressors on this one, as well as the EQ with a small dip in the overall gain here. I took it down 1 level, but that's the second EQ. The first EQ, I put a little dip here in where some of the extra sound was. I didn't want it to have too much of an actual kick drum sound. If you can hear the difference. So by doing that, it's now coming together a little bit. Alright guys, tip number 3. Think like live music if you're actually doing something that sounds like live music. I talked about how I'm trying to make this sound like it's real band playing. So when you think about real bands or live versions of songs that you may have heard from a CD, when you go in concert, it sounds a little different. There's arrangements that are different. There's things that live musicians do to make a track sound live and sound lively. So you have breakdowns that happen in the track. Of course, other music has breakdowns and such, but you want to think about how like the drummer would do if a breakdown were to happen, or if the bass player, what would he do if there was a breakdown? Would he ride the groove a different way? The keyboard player, how would they groove with the bass and the drum section? So you want to try and emulate that kind of feeling even though you're using virtual instruments. Alright y'all, tip number 4. Think about the sound space. We've talked about panning and automation before, but when we're thinking about live instruments, there's not too much panning going on. There's not too much constant movement back and forth. So you're thinking about stationary instruments or stationary musicians on stage. Now think about this: when you've been on to a concert and you've seen people on stage, where did you see them placed? As the bass player, usually near the drummer. Is the keyboard on the left or the right or in the middle? Fact is, there are many different stage setups, but if you're thinking about creating your sound stage for your live music song, how do you want it to be? Right now, I've got my drums in the middle. The bass is a little bit to the left because I want the bass player right next to the drummer. I've got piano on the right, a little bit to the right, not completely to the right. I've got some of the synth pads to the right of the drum. So all of this is in my mind. I'm seeing the stage, or I'm creating the stage that I see in my mind based on how I want this song to sound. And then I'm adding reverb, or I'm lowering volumes so that they can feel like they're actually spread across a stage instead of just actual, bunch of instruments in your face like I talked about before. Tip number 5, think like an audience. If you're thinking of something cool that you've experienced at a live show, a lot of times it's music solos, or it's a breakdown that you don't hear in the actual CD version of the song. So I put a little jam break in the middle of this just because I wanted to. Truth be told, it's actually a part where I dance with my wife, but I figured that this would be something nice. So I thought about how I've seen live concerts, and there's this one part where all the musicians just jam out for a bit, and I was like, oh man, I loved it. So why not put that in a live song that you're making? And it stretches you musically. I'm not one to solo very much, so it made me think outside of my usual box and create a solo of sorts where I just played around with what I knew. I knew the scale, I knew what notes were working with it, so I went ahead and did it, and I made something that I liked. And there you have it. Another beat is in the books. Now let's go over the 5 things that I talked about in this episode. Number 1, if you have a stock sound and it sounds good, that's okay. There's nothing to be ashamed of. If you like a sound that comes with your Logic Pro or your Reason or your Cubase or your Ableton, and it fits what you're trying to do. Most of the time, you're going to play around with it, but if it fits, nothing wrong with that. Number 2, create and craft your drum sounds as needed. And it's more than just picking the sounds, but actually going in and adjusting each of like the hi-hat, the snare, the bass drum, the toms, so that it really fits whatever type of drum kit you're making. Number 3, you want to make sure that you are thinking like a live musician if you're trying to create a sound that is like a live band. Meaning it's more than just loops. It's thinking, how do real musicians alter what they're playing? When you see them on stage, what little extra things are they doing, and bring that into your track. Number 4, creating sound space. If you are thinking of a live band, think about how you've seen live bands on stage. Are they all lined up in the middle? Or is the drum in the middle, the bass on the left, the keys to the right? And pan things accordingly and create reverb that makes it fill the space in a way that a live band would sound like. And number 5, think like your audience. What have you enjoyed when you're listening to live instruments, when you're listening to live bands, when you go to concerts? What things about the live arrangements make you be attentive? And add that to your track. Think of ways to make it as exciting as that as you possibly can. So thank you so much for watching this episode. And remember, everybody, creativity has no boundaries. Use your God-given gifts and talents to create something fresh today. But remember, make sure you're having fun while you're doing it. See you next time.
And I've got to say each and every day that baby, you're the one I've been praying for. She's fine, so fine, and her love's divine. Baby, you're the one I've been praying for.